Dutch cuisine consists of the cooking traditions and practices from the Netherlands. The country's cuisine is shaped by the practice of fishing and farming, including the cultivation of the soil for raising crops and the raising of domesticated animals, and the history of the Netherlands. Traditionally, Dutch cuisine is simple and straightforward, with many vegetables and little meat. Breakfast and lunch are typically bread with toppings, while dinner is meat and potatoes, supplemented with seasonal vegetables. The Dutch diet was relatively high in carbohydrates and fat, reflecting the dietary need of the laborers whose culture molded the country, and contains many dairy products. Without many refinements, it is best described as rustic, though many holidays are still celebrated with special foods. In the course of the 20th century, this diet changed and became much more cosmopolitan, with most international cuisines being represented in the major cities. History. Middle Ages. Little evidence is available about food and drink in the late medieval Low Countries. In the consumption of pottage, the Low Countries were not very different from other Western European countries during the Middle Ages. Half-liquid pottage consisted of milk, beer, water, root vegetable and peas or grain, sometimes enriched with a piece of meat. The content changes throughout the seasons. Beer flavored with gruit was produced until the 14th century at the monasteries. Gruit was replaced with hop, a tradition introduced from the German city of Bremen, and this started off a beer culture in the Low Counties as a major exporter of beer. Beer was in medieval times the common drink as water was of poor quality, and milk coming from the low-lying grasslands of Holland and Friesland was mainly used for the production of butter and cheese. Dutch butter and cheese became famous products at an early stage and continued to do so for centuries. The sea and the rivers provided an abundance of fish. The process of gubbing was invented by Willem Boekelszoon, a 14th-century Zeeland fisherman. The invention created an export industry for salt herring that was monopolized by the Dutch. They began to build ships and eventually moved from trading in herring to colonizing in the Dutch Empire, ultimately leading to the Dutch becoming a seafaring power. Herring is still very important to the Dutch, who celebrate Vlaggetjesdag each spring, as a tradition that dates back to the 14th century when fishermen went out to sea in their small boats to capture the annual catch, and to preserve and export their catch abroad. Gardening was initially practiced by monasteries, but castles and country houses began also to develop gardens with herbs and vegetables and hunting grounds. The famous tourist attraction and flower park Keukenhof is an example of a former 15th-century hunting ground and herbs garden for Jacqueline, Countess of Hainault's castle kitchen. Orchards for pears and apples connected to castles were later used for export and set off a Dutch horticulture tradition until today. During the 15th century, haute cuisine began to emerge, largely limited to the aristocracy. Cookery books from this period are aimed at the upper class. The first Dutch-language cookbook printed in Brussels is called Een Notable-boekje van Kookjen. It offers medieval recipes for festivities, such sauces, towel, game, jellies, fish, eat, pies, tarts, eggs, dairy products, candied quinces and ginger. The recipes come from various sources, many of the French. Historically, Dutch cuisine was closely related to Northern French cuisine, since the two countries have nearby borders and the Low Countries and northern France have been historically ruled by the Dukes of Burgundy. This is still visible in traditional Dutch restaurants and the southern regional cuisine, that is still colloquially referred to as Burgundish. 17th century. As the Dutch Republic enters its golden age in the 17th century, the Dutch Empire enabled spices, sugar, and exotic fruits to be imported to the country. The Dutch East India Company was the first to import coffee on a large scale to Europe. The Dutch later grew the crop in Java and Ceylon. The first exports of Indonesian coffee from Java to the Netherlands occurred in 1711. By the late 17th century, tea and coffee consumption were increasing and becoming part of everyday life. Tea was served with sweets, candy or marzipan and cookies. The availability of relative cheaper spices resulted in a tradition of spiced cookies called speculoos, which exact recipes were kept secret by bakers. Vegetables, meat, poultry and salted, smoked or fresh fish and egg was prepared in the Dutch kitchens of the time. The meal started with green salads and cold or warm cooked vegetables with dressing, vegetable dishes with butter, herbs or edible flowers, and continued with numerous fish and meat dishes. Exotic ingredients such as dates, rice, cinnamon, ginger and saffron were used. Savory tarts and pastries followed. The meal ended with jellies, cheese, nuts and sweet pastries, washed down with sweet spiced wine. Of course, even in the Golden Age, not everyone could afford such luxuries, and the everyday meal of the ordinary Dutchman was still a humble affair of grain or legume pottage served with rye. Dutch Golden Age, historical cuisine. Kitchen scene from 1644, by David Teniers the Younger. Mince Pie and Lemon by Peter Klaus, 1625. Clara Peter's Still Life with Crab, Shrimps and Lobster. Clara Peter's Table with Orange, Olives and Pie. Clara Peter's Still Life with Cheeses, Artichoke, and Cherries. Still Life with Fruit, Nuts and Cheese by Floris Claus Zoon van Dyck. 18th–20th century. In the 18th century the potato gained popularity, to become a staple food by 1800. In the early 1800s, while the rich could eat what they desired, the working population ate bread and potatoes, pancakes in some areas, occasionally fish and other seafood, fruit and vegetables, but usually little meat. The diet of the Dutch in the 19th century consisted of some bread, and a great deal of potatoes. Diet consisted in a frugal fashion, of such simple dishes as bread and a herring. Throughout the 19th century many people suffered from some mild form of malnutrition. Potatoes, in fact, were often eaten at every meal, every day of the week. They were peeled and boiled for the main meal, lunch, and then warmed and mashed for dinner, with leftovers saved for breakfast. They were served with salt, sometimes vinegar, but without gravy or any other fat, making for a diet with incredible monotony. During the 19th century, the poor people drank little else but water, sometimes watery coffee or tea. In some areas hot chocolate was consumed, but the most popular drinks were beer and Geneva. For most of the century beer was drunk in the southern part, where Catholicism dominated, and in Catholic enclaves in the other areas. This beer was top fermented and of terrible quality. Not until the 1880s did German-style bottom-fermented Pilsner enter the Dutch market. Geneva consumption early in the 19th century was twice that of the equivalent consumption of distilled in neighboring countries. The modest and plain look of what is nowadays considered the traditional Dutch cuisine appears to be the result of a fairly recent development. In the 20th century, the new availability of mass education meant that a great number of girls could be sent to a new school type, the Huishoud school, where young women were trained to become domestic servants and where lessons in cooking cheap and simple meals were a major part of the curriculum, often based on more traditional Dutch dishes, and leading to increased uniformity in the Dutch diet. Values taught in that school system included frugality, proper manners, and healthy eating. Regional cuisines. Modern culinary writers distinguish between three general regional forms of Dutch cuisine. Northeastern cuisine, the regions in the north and east of the Netherlands, roughly the provinces of Groningen, Friesland, Drenthe, Overijssel and Gelderland north of the great rivers make up northeastern Dutch cuisine. The region is the least populated area of the Netherlands, and the least developed part. The late introduction of large-scale agriculture means that the cuisine is generally known for its many kinds of meats. The relative lack of farms allowed for an abundance of game and husbandry, though dishes near the coastal regions of Friesland, Groningen and the parts of Overijssel bordering the IJsselmeer also include a large amount of fish. The various dried sausages, belonging to the Metworst family of Dutch sausages, are found throughout the region and are highly prized for their often very strong taste. Most towns and various villages have their own variety of this sausage. The region also produces the traditional smoked sausages, of which Rookwurst is the most renowned. These sausages traditionally have been smoked over wood chips, and are served after they have been boiled in water. The sausage contains a lot of fat and is very juicy. Larger sausages are often eaten alongside Stamppot, Hutspot or Zuurkool, whereas smaller ones are often eaten as a street food. The provinces are also home to rye bread and many kinds of pastries and cookies. In contrast to southern Dutch cuisine, which tends to be soft and moist, the northeastern rye bread and pastries generally are of a hard texture, and the pasties are heavily spiced with ginger or sucade or contain small bits of meat. Various kinds of kruidkoek, friskdamkes and spekdieken are considered typical. Each of the provinces of Gelderland, Overijssel and Groningen has a long-standing rye bread tradition. But rye bread from Friesland became well known because of its taste. Notable characteristics of Frijsroggebrood is its long baking time, resulting in a sweet taste and a deep dark color. In terms of alcoholic beverages, the region is renowned for its many bitters and other high-proof liquors rather than beer, which is, apart from Geneva, typical for the rest of the country. As a coastal region, Friesland is home to low-lying grasslands, and thus has a cheese production in common with the Western cuisine. Friesche Gelkaas is a notable example. Western cuisine. The provinces of North Holland, South Holland, Zeeland, Utrecht and the Gelderlandic region of Betuwe are the parts of the Netherlands which make up the region in which Western Dutch cuisine is found. The area is known for its many dairy products, which includes prominent cheeses such as Gouda, Leyden, Edam as well as Leerdammer and Beemster, while the adjacent Zaanstreek in North Holland is since the 16th century known for its mayonnaise, typical whole-grain mustards and chocolate industry. Zeeland and South Holland produce a lot of butter, which contains a larger amount of milk fat than most other European butter varieties. A byproduct of the butter-making process, karnemelt, is also considered typical for this region. Seafood such as herring, mussels, eels, oysters and shrimps are widely available and typical for the region. Kibbeling, once a local delicacy consisting of small chunks of battered whitefish, has become a national fast food, just as lekkerbek. Pastries in this area tend to be quite doughy, and often contain large amounts of sugar, either caramelized, powdered or crystallized. The oliebollen and zeeuwebolis are good examples. Cookies are also produced in great number and tend to contain a lot of butter and sugar, like stroopwafel, as well as a filling of some kind, mostly almond, like gevoldekoek. The traditional alcoholic beverages of this region are beer and Geneva, a high-proof juniper-flavored spirit that came to be known in England as gin. A noted exception within the traditional Dutch alcoholic landscape, Advocaat, a rich and creamy liqueur made from eggs, sugar and brandy, is also native to this region. Southern cuisine. Southern Dutch cuisine constitutes the cuisine of the Dutch provinces of North Brabant and Limburg and the Flemish region in Belgium. It is renowned for its many rich pastries, soups, stews and vegetable dishes and is often called Burgundian, which is a Dutch idiom invoking the rich Burgundian court which ruled the Low Countries in the Middle Ages, renowned for its splendor and great feasts. It is the only Dutch culinary region which developed an haute cuisine, and it forms the base of most traditional Dutch restaurants, including typical main courses served such as beefstuk, varkenshaas, ossenhaas. These are premium cuts of meat, generally pork or beef, accompanied by a wide variety of sauces and potatoes which have been double-fried in the traditional Dutch manner. Stews, such as hashi, a stew of onions, beef and a thick gravy, contain a lot of flavor and require hours to prepare. Vegetable soups are made from richly flavored stock or bouillon and typically contain small meatballs alongside a wide variety of different vegetables. Asparagus and whitloaf are highly prized and traditionally eaten with cheese or ham. Pastries are abundant, often with rich fillings of cream, custard or fruits. Cakes, such as the Vlaai from Limburg and the Moorkop and Bosjebol from Brabant, are typical pastries. Savory pastries also occur, with the Wurstenbroodage being the most popular. The traditional alcoholic beverage of the region is beer. There are many local brands, ranging from Trappist to Kriek. 5 of the 10 International Trappist Association recognized breweries in the world are located in the southern Dutch cultural area. Beer, like wine in French cuisine, is also used in cooking, often in stews. Food's origin. Native Dutch agriculture roughly consists of 5 sectors: tillage-based, greenhouse-based, and fruit agriculture, animal husbandry and fishery. Tillage-based crops include potatoes, kale, beetroot, green beans, carrots, celeriac, onions, all kind of cabbages, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, endive, spinach, Belgian endive, asparagus and lettuce. Recently some initiatives have been started to encourage interest in such forgotten vegetables as common purslane, medlars, parsnips, and black salsify. Greenhouses are used to produce tomatoes, lettuce, cucumbers, and sweet peppers. Fruits include apples, pears, cherries, berries, and plums. The Dutch keep cows for milk, butter, cheese and for their meat, chickens for their eggs and for meat, pigs for their meat and a variety of non-edible products, and sheep for their wool and meat. Goats are increasingly kept for cheese production. Traditionally horse meat was a common dish but is less popular today. The fishery sector lands cod, herring, plaice, sole, mackerel, eels, tuna, salmon, trout, oysters, mussels, shrimp, and sardines. The Dutch are famous for their smoked eel and soused herring, which is eaten raw. Colonial influences. Indonesian and Indo dishes became popular due to the arrival of former Dutch colonials and people of Eurasian descent into the Netherlands, especially after the independence of Indonesia from Dutch colonial rule in 1949. C. Countess van Limburg-Sterum writes in her book The Art of Dutch Cooking, there exist countless Indonesian dishes, some of which take hours to prepare, but a few easy ones have become so popular that they can be regarded as national dishes. She then provides recipes for nasi goreng, pisang goreng, lumpia goreng, barmi, satay sauce, and sambal oelek. Of the Dutch-Indonesian fusion dishes, the best known is the rijstafel, which is an elaborate meal consisting of many small dishes. While popular in the Netherlands, rijstafel is now rare in Indonesia itself. While almost every town in the Netherlands has an Indonesian Chinese restaurant, a popular fusion dish is fried satay or patatja pinda, French fries with satay sauce as condiment, served at snack bars. Surinamese cuisine is also popular in the Netherlands, especially in the bigger cities. Surinamese establishments commonly offer roti, a staple of the Hindustani community in Suriname. Various Surinamese interpretations of Chinese Indonesian cuisine, as well as Surinamese sandwiches. International influences. Italian and American-style pizzerias have become widespread. In recent decades, Arab and Turkish dishes have become increasingly popular as well, especially as a snack food. In larger towns and cities, small restaurants selling kebab, shawarma and falafel can be found on virtually any street corner. Nowadays, food from every nook or corner of the world can be found throughout the country, especially in bigger towns and cities, including Greek, Thai, Japanese and even African cuisine.